All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the webinar here today. My name's Adam, and we'll be reviewing some of the new features that we released in our most recent release. And hopefully you can see my screen here. We'll point out that we're talking today about version 4.11.11.3166 is the most current release that we've made available. And so just to remind you again that there you should have that chat option available to you in your uh, webinar controls. So if you want to send a chat message to maybe ask a question, some of those things we can get to, and if not, we can follow up with you after the fact and answers maybe any of the questions that we didn't quite cover. But in the meantime, maybe somebody out there can send in a quick chat message and let me know that you can see the screen and you can hear me. Just make sure we cover all those technical difficulties. Okay, looks like somebody can. All right, sounds good. So we'll go ahead and get started here with some of the different features that are available. I'm going to come and start over here in the Plan tab, and something simple and straightforward. You may have noticed it already if you've been using the software, and that is in the takeoff items list. So here we have the default pack setting. And previously, all that we showed was the name of the pack to which you were connected, which was clear for most people in cases where you only had one list. But in this case, on this job, I have two lists, and the pack names are relatively the same name, but they're just in different lists. So in this type of context or setting, it was difficult to tell which pack you were actually attached to. So now we display the list name. But then conversely, if we only have one list showing, so in this case, I'm going to remove the alternate beam list. And when I do, I'll come back to my Plan tab and notice that I no longer have that list indicator because at this point it's obvious it's located at that one list. So that's the new feature, or just a quick or a small update there for the default pack where the list is shown when you have multiple lists. Another small item for some of you who make use of the framing detail tags. So these tags here where you can come in and specify a specific framing condition and then have that show up on your layout. We've updated several of those. I think there's maybe 10 or 11 or 12 of them that have been updated and are available now to use with newly updated information. So just making you aware of that. Coming on to some more interesting items, I'm going to come here to this floor plan that I have drawn. And you can see I've got over the top of this wall right here, this mid-span wall, I've got some blocking. Now in this case, it's not entirely easy to tell that that is blocking shown there. So what we've introduced is a new condition for segment lines. So I'm going to right click on this segment line, come to condition, and I'm going to choose the option for blocking no split. But before I do, I'm going to point out to you over in the takeoff items list, here's our floor joist blocking. Notice I have 18 lineal feet of it. So I'm going to right click, come to condition, and choose blocking no split. And when I do, you can see what happens. My segment line turns into what visualizes as kind of individual blocking panels, if you will. And it just becomes more evident and more apparent to the people who are looking at the layout that, oh yeah, that's a blocking condition there and it's not something else that I'm not quite sure what it is. So you also notice that over in the takeoff items list that the amount got less. I now only am calling 16 lineal feet. And that's because the thickness of the joist is being taken out. So since the blocking isn't going to be running through those particular members, the thickness of the joist is going to be removed from that. Now, just to clarify, there's extra space that's been added here visually to make it easier to tell that this is a blocking piece. But that extra space that you visually see on the screen has not been removed from the total lineal footage. So that's just a visualization thing, but the amount that's actually removed from your total lineal feet is just the thickness of the joist that's being added up. So then if I wanted to draw more of this, I could draw more sections like this, and I could, if I wanted some over here, and I could draw it in this location, so it's the same idea. And in addition to that, if I wanted to break the joist over top of this bearing, I can right-click, come to condition, and instead of picking blocking no split, I could pick blocking split. So I've got that same condition, got that same visualization that's happening there, but in this case, I'm breaking the joist over top of that bearing. So blocking condition, new thing that's been added in there. In a similar way, we've also added in, as a convenience for, based on some of the feedback that we've had from you guys, holding open context menu items. Some of you had indicated that in some cases, for example, if I right-click on this floor container, if I come to the spacing and I set this to 12 inches, in previous versions, that context menu, the whole menu would have closed down on you. And many of you said, hey, I'd like to be able to keep that thing open as long as I want to still make changes and updates within that menu. So we've gone back through the different menus that are in the digitizer, and we've looked for ones that we could make adjustments to, and we hold those open now. In this case, if I was to choose 12 inches, it's going to keep that menu open still for you, so you can continue to make more changes. So as you go around to different places, you should see some improved behavior in that way, with menus being kept open for you longer. Another thing that's kind of another long-standing request from users is the ability to resize text boxes. So now you should be able to click on a text box, and you'll get these additional nodes that are around the outside of your text box. And now you can resize them, and the text will wrap accordingly to match that. So you should no longer have to actually draw out or drag out your text boxes to be really wide and format them after the fact. Now you can draw them in kind of as you're used to, perhaps in other programs, where you can draw them and then resize them later to fit the particular need of your note size and function. Similarly to that, we've also added those control nodes to images that you may have added to your layout. So again, you can just drag corners and resize those images as needed. And the same is also true for highlighters. So now you can also resize highlighters after the fact, grabbing the control nodes and resizing them as you would need to highlight the specific areas of your project. So resizing of highlighters, images, and note boxes are all available in this new version. Coming to a different page over here, I want to talk about rescaling of pages. We come down to this alternate page here. And in previous versions, we've released to you the option to be able to rescale a page, but only if it was a auto-scaled page. So a standard 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch, 16th. And you would do that by right-clicking on the page, coming to page scale, and choosing a different scale. But if you had a page that was manually scaled or needed to be manually rescaled, there wasn't an option or a way to accomplish that. So though, we have introduced in this version. So here on this page, you can see that the scale just looks a little off. In fact, it almost looks like twice the amount it should be. I can verify that, draw a little dimension line here. And here it's showing 3 feet instead of the 1'6" that it should be. So obviously we've scaled something wrong, but we've got all this stuff drawn. So to rescale this page manually, because this page needs to be scaled in a manual fashion, the process to do that is to go back to Prep, which is where you would have done your scaling to begin with. So I'm going to click the Go to Prep button. And now that I'm back here, there's a new button that's available to you in Prep mode, and that is this one here, called Removing Scaling Lines and or Existing Scale. So by clicking this button, any scale lines or scale that's been assigned to the page, you're essentially pulling that off to allow you then to manually rescale the page. So I'm going to click this button, and if I'd had scale lines on there showing, they would have been removed. Now I'm going to come to my scale tool so I can manually rescale this page. And I'll follow that same process like you would normally do if you were scaling this from the start. So click 2 points. We'll assign this what this should be. This should be 25.2, and then we'll scale 1 vertically as well on the page. Make sure we get it in the right spot. All right, and so now we've scaled it both directions. And again, as you have done before, you're going to click Go to Draw. But this time, since you're rescaling the page, it's going to ask you to confirm that you indeed want to actually rescale. We'll click Yes, and it's going to take me back to this page. Now here's all the things that we have drawn previously, and you can see all the points that I've clicked, they're on the same relative spot on the page. So this container line still matches the perimeter of the area that I've drawn. These beams that I've drawn are still in those same location. But the items that have been drawn in, now they reflect the appropriate dimensions based on the scale that the page has now been given. So the on-center spacing has been adjusted. There's fewer joists on the page to match that appropriate scale. But the joists have been cut back to match the new beam thickness and so on. The one thing that you'll need to be aware of, and this would be true if you were manually rescaling or auto rescaling the page, you can see here that I've got a segment line, and it's because of this smaller scale that it's at now, or larger scale, depending on which way you're looking at it, the images or the segment lines are overlapping from where they were previously. So I'll have to adjust where segments are adjoining segments if I want to dial in specifically where they should be. So to do that, I can just grab the node and move it, which is a good opportunity to point out that some of you may remember that last release that we made possible the idea of ortho node movements, where I can grab a node and then hold down the shift key, and it's going to hold that in perfectly ortho fashion. In this release, we've made some improvements to that. If you were using that feature in the last version, you might have noticed that it didn't always get it exactly in the ortho fashion that you might have expected. So we've made some adjustments there, and that should be spot on now, matching the ortho both horizontal and vertical like you would expect. So continuing on there, another new feature is the ability to suppress a particular group label. So I can come to this group label here, and if I wanted to just turn it off so I didn't have that particular group label, I can right-click on the group label and choose to suppress the group label. And now those labels are there and able to be, and they'll be responsive to the automatic label positioning button. But here's a good opportunity to talk also about another feature that we've made changes to when it comes to labeling, and that's the orientation of the label. So you can see right now all of the labels on the page, as they have been in previous releases, they're oriented basically just flat on the page or perfectly horizontal. But you now have the option to have your labels run in the orientation of the member that they're assigned to. So I'm going to come to the Profile, Labeling tab, and you'll notice this new section over here, Label Orientation. I'm going to choose Follow Member Orientation, come back to Plan, and notice now for all of my single labels, for example these, they're all running in the direction of the member to which they are associated or a part of. So to make that even more clear, we could say I can come to this particular joist here, this beam that I've drawn, and notice its label is running flat on the page, but if I was to have it drawn at an angle, then its label is going to follow it at that particular angle. Group labels, on the other hand, do stay perfectly horizontal regardless of which direction they're running. Another thing with labels, while we're talking about labels, is over in the Profile tab again, we've expanded the ability for customization of your labels and how they look. So if you've always wanted to be able to make your labels look a different way, you now have that option. So for example, with our hanger labels, we could come here and we could say, oh, I want to pick, a different type of label like that, and I want my font color to be that, and I want my background to be that, and I want my border to be that. So you can make all those changes, come to Plan, and so for your hanger labels, that's what they would look like if you chose that. Maybe a little bit different, but you can have control over those settings. So that's true over here in the Profile Labeling tab. So That's true for hanger labels, regular labels, and also notes. So if you wanted your annotation notes, those little note boxes that you can resize now, if you want that text to come in with some different font or different font size, you can set the defaults all for that type of thing. And one final thing over here in the labeling tab, just a fine point that you may have noticed. Over here, there's a slash mark in the color, and that's just to help you see how much transparency or opacity that your color has that you've picked. So in this case, you can see the line is showing through kind of faintly through the pink. But if I picked, say, this red color that's pretty much all opaque, that it covers over that line completely. So they'd be comparable to the lines on the page that you are tracing over the top of how much it's going to cover them up. So that's what the slash mark is there for. Okay, so continuing on over to the project now, a few changes that have been made there. First, I'm going to come to the Reports tab. And when I go ahead and click to view the report, one of the things that's going to pop up for many of you is this quick check error. And you may remember from the last release that we made the quick check feature available. And hopefully, even though I know it's been a busy season the last month or two, but hopefully you've found a little bit of time to customize that and have that fit your business needs, where you can help heighten the accuracy of your takeoffs with really not too much extra effort on each of your projects. But what this new feature in this current version is every time that you go to produce output, so reports, the publish tab, framing layouts, anytime you're actually going to send that job out, that quick check is going to be run in the background for you. And if something is found to be wrong or unaddressed yet, it's going to give you a little warning message reminding you of that. So I could choose to continue on with my errors. So I could say, just ignore it, I'm good with that, and go on. Or I could cancel and review. So I'm going to choose the cancel and review option. I'm going to come back to my quick check and take a closer look at what it is that I'm missing. So in this case, I've called roof decking, but I didn't call any shingles. And so for me in this case, for this particular job, that's all right, because I'm not calling the shingles. So I can just click to dismiss that one. But these other two, stair stringers, I didn't call anywhere, and my roof clips for my roof decking. Oh, that's a problem. So I'm going to come to my list, come to upper floor, throw in my stair stringers really quick. It was 610 footers because of the landing. And then I will come over to my roof, find my roof decking, and miscellaneous connectors. There they are. I forgot to put those in, so I'll add those. And now that I've addressed those two problems, I can come back to quick check, refresh that, and now I'm just down to that one that I've chosen to ignore. At this point, if I come to reports and I choose view, even though I had that one outstanding item, since I had dismissed it, when I click view, I'm no longer going to get a pop-up. It's just going to take me right into the report. So which brings us to another feature. Last time that we released, we pointed out that for your exports, for your Excel sheets, you now have notes that are available in your Excel export. And we made one little final change or final update to that feature. So just reminding you here what that looks like. So down here at the bottom, you have a new tab for notes. And in this latest version, if you have images with your notes, those come along as well. Previously, the notes were excluded on the export to Excel, but now they're included in there also. Another couple of items when it comes to the export capabilities is you now have an option to export to Sabris. For anybody who is a Sabris user out there, we have a connection with them, or that's in their particular style format. And one other point of sale that we have also been working with recently and are nearly done with and should be available with this version that we've made available to you is Ponderosa. So if you, any of you are Ponderosa users and you would like to be able to have exports come out of the software and be in a format that you can just import right into Ponderosa, you can talk to us more about that opportunity. Over in the Notes tab, we've added an additional column here called Auto Attached Framing Layouts. Some of you have notes that you tend to want to include on all of your framing layouts. So maybe you have a general note that looks something like this that applies a bunch of information to your framing layout. So you can choose to check for that note in your template file if you set it to auto attach to framing layouts. As you create additional framing layouts in the future, then that note will automatically be placed on that. So for example, if we came to this particular page, upper floor plan, or let's go to the upper floor framing, and we wanted to capture a new layout of that. So we'll capture a new one. And as soon as we do that, notice down in the lower right-hand corner that that note that we said to auto attach has already been placed onto the layout. Another thing in the area of layouts relates to another controls that we've made available to you. And I'm going to come over here to the upper floor framing. So sometimes, or to actually, no, let's go to the front elevations. So here we've got some siding, and let's say that I wanted to create a simple layout for my siding. So I'm going to include my band board and my lap siding and my shingle siding. And I wanted just a simple layout of this, and maybe I wanted to do it for my other elevations as well. So I'm going to set that, and I'm going to come over to my framing layouts, and I'm going to choose 11 by 17 simple, and let's capture siding. And when we do, we've got that auto attached note on here, but notice up in the upper right-hand corner that because of the type of layout that I'm doing here, that the cut logic, it's all blanks as well as the length. So the cut logic especially it's not really relevant, and maybe for some of you, it's just not really relevant any time, and you would prefer to not have the cut logic column show on your framing layouts. So you can actually control that. I'll detach this one note. We don't have to have a note on that layout. So I've created a new framing layout style for myself called 11 by 17 siding, no cut logic. I'm going to choose to view that same layout with that layout style. And notice now in the upper right-hand corner, I'm not taking up any of that extra space with the cut logic, and that column is just removed. So that can be useful when you're creating layouts that produce things that aren't really showing you any extra information in the cut logic column. Another change we've made in the framing layout area is repositioning the image, which you've always been able to do. But notice now that I can come all the way over here underneath the material list and still display my list, staying down here in the details area. So you can now position your image and resize it to a different scale and take up all of that space on the page instead of being restricted to just a small box of it. So we've increased that size. And just to give you a hint of what's coming, don't say these things too much ahead of time, but in the area of layouts, we're also currently actively working on making some more components on the framing layouts flexible. So details that are down here, you'll be able to grab those and move those around. Same with the material list, be able to position that on different places on the page. So trying to make things even more flexible for you on your framing layouts. And so look for that. That's not in this version, but look for that in the upcoming versions. And finally, for those of you who call a fair amount of hangers in your project and maybe custom hangers, we've added some updates to the database. Now these changes I'm going to show you here aren't in the software version. There would be something that you would need to have us update your template file, basically get some updated database information into your template file available. But for example, here is my hanger application, and let's say I was calling some LGU hangers and they were some custom ones. So now if I arrow to the right, I can come to the X column, the modification column, and I have all of the heights available to me. So I could find 13.5, pick that for my height. And other attributes that I have include the seat slope. So if I had a 30-degree slope on my hanger, I could now select that. And then also the skew. And those skews have all been added in here now as well. So I could enter in a 45-degree skew for my hanger. So all those things are available now, so you can see on my custom hanger that I've been able to create right here without having to go to the custom product and actually type all of that information in. So that brings us to the end of the list of features for this particular release. If you have a question, you could type that in there yet, and we can answer a couple of those if there's something that needs to be covered. Otherwise, we can follow up with you on some of those questions after the fact. So hopefully you all have been able to get onto that new version. Again, just to review, that's going to be 4.11.11.3166 will be the version that you want to be the most up to date on. So thanks for joining us today for the webinar, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.